Welcome back. Good to see you. I hope you had a good week. I know I did. Episode 8. Welcome to episode number 8. So today we're going to dive right in, give you top 10 shows from the 80s. We're also going to visit the restaurant experience from the 80s to now. We're going to give you a little bonus round into the inside of my life this week with the wife and kids being gone. It's been interesting. And then an update on the big announcement from last week in the last segment. So we got a good one. I'm fired up. That's all I know. So last week we talked about the television habits of the 1980s and 90s and how we watch TV today and how it's changed a little bit. And I was kind of thumbing through some things getting ready for this week's podcast, and I came across a really cool article from the Rolling Stone, which actually covered what we were talking about, which was shows from the 1980s. And so they've actually gone through and did a reader's poll back in 2015 and discovered the top 10 shows that people remember from the 1980s. And a lot of these I'd heard of, but some I'd heard of but never really watched. So starting off at number 10 was Night Court. And Night Court was really cool. I always thought that if I ever wanted to, get into the legal field, that would be a cool place to, kind of do a night court thing. And, I didn't really understand as a kid what it was all about, but that was always a pretty cool show. The other one, number 9, was Moonlighting, which of course had Bruce Willis in it before the Die Hard series came out. It was not a show that I ever really watched, but it was apparently very popular in the 1980s, which brings us to the 1980s classic Family Ties. This was a quintessential 80s show, of course, that put Michael J. Fox on the map, and he went on to do some amazing things afterwards. But we always saw the trials and tribulations week in and week out of what this family went through, and it was a very interesting show for the time period. And that leads us to number 7, which was the A-Team. I pitied a fool who didn't watch this show growing up to put Mr. T on the map. And of course, we all wanted to be superheroes and save the world after watching the A-Team. Of course, this is a show that is parodied on a number of other shows, even still today, such as Family Guy and American Dad. Then rounding out the list at number 6 was Alf. And who didn't want a neighbor that had an alien that would eat your cat if you weren't paying attention? I always thought this show was very interesting because it led me to wonder if my neighbors were keeping a secret, such as, an alien that would eat my cat. But again, fun show to watch, lots of creativity. Number 5 is The Wonder Years. I love this show. It actually premiered in 1988, around after the Super Bowl. And it kind of took place in the late 60s and carried us on through. And it was really interesting that I could relate to a lot of the things that were in that show growing up with Kevin and his friend Paul, and of course Winnie Cooper. And watching it as an adult, it certainly gave me a different perspective on the things that I watched as a child. Number 4, Never Wanted to Be a Shoe Salesman Because of Al Bundy and Married with Children was a sitcom that was on Sunday nights pretty much its entire career, and we all got to know and love Al Bundy. And of course, his wife Peggy was the bonbon-eating, shoe-flicking, soap opera, Oprah-watching housewife that we all knew and loved. And of course, his daughter, Kelly and her shenanigans, and Bud, who was, Grandmaster, whatever. You get the idea. That was an awesome show back in the day. Number 3 was Hill Street Blues. Do I need to say anything else? It's totally 80s. And now if you watch this show as an adult, it certainly has a different view on things as when we watched it in the 80s. But a lot of things you could not get away with today coming from that particular show. But it's a very interesting police show, coming down to Miami Vice, which is number 2. Again, it's quintessentially the 80s. A lot of the things from the outfits, the cars, the music, the cocaine, the scantily clad women. They actually had two of the stars from the show, Don Johnson and Philip Michael Thomas, both had music videos on MTV. And the show actually ended in 1989, which of course is right on time for this particular show. But the number 1 show that people always remember from the 80s, oddly enough, is Cheers. And I grew up watching this show, and of course as an adult I see it in a very different way than I did growing up. But it was an awesome kind of culmination of different people that came together in one bar, and several careers were launched from this particular show. And some people were kind of the butt of jokes and so forth. Kirstie Alley, we have a lot of fun things to say about her. And then of course Ted Danson And then we all know Norm and the mailman Cliff, and all these characters came together to really give us an exciting episode of television every week. So there's a top 10 of television shows from the 80s. I hope you enjoyed this little trip down memory lane. So one of the things I always enjoy on these podcasts is taking that trip down memory lane. I've been kind of nostalgic the last several months. I don't know if it's my near-death experience or if it's just when you turn 40, it's what you do or what the story is. But I was having a very interesting conversation with a good friend of mine earlier today, funny enough. And I've had this conversation about restaurants recently in the sense that our dining experiences have changed so much from when we were younger as kids and to adults. And I don't think it's because, as an adult, eating is one thing versus when we were kids. It was just a completely different experience. So one of the things that jumps out at me is the fact that when we used to go to this little lovely wonderland called McDonald's, and McDonald's was a magical place. It wasn't just four walls with, a fryer and burgers in the back. McDonald's was like it was an adventure. Everything about McDonald's was awesome. From the big bright red roof to the golden arches, the bright yellows when you would walk in, Ronald McDonald and his ridiculous bright yellow outfit and the white and red stripes. It was just, everything about it was nuts, and it was an experience. And you walk in, you place your order, you get your Happy Meal, and you dive in, and it was such an awesome experience. And the box was cool with this golden arches handles, and you get your toy out, and sometimes they would have like the collectible Garfield glasses, and you get the Grimace whatever. They had all these different characters that were always incorporated in what they had going on in the box. And it was just such an adventure. And it was so much more than just, let's get out here and get a hamburger and fries. It was, hey, let's have some fun. Let's really get excited about it. And we remember that as kids. And so when you were driving in any town USA, you could be visiting a place you'd never been to before, and it was like, wow, there's Mom, we got to stop at McDonald's. Hardee's was all right, it was cool, but we didn't have a Burger King where I live, so McDonald's is where it was at, man. And of course, the play place with the bright, blue and purple and red, plastic whatever's in the ball pit, and it was just, it was just a magical place. That was just your fast food restaurants. That was an event. That was exciting. Then you go into other types of restaurants, and it was a very different experience. It was absolutely like you go into Taco Bell. Man, Taco Bell had the bright, crazy colors. It was very much like, I've never been to the Alamo, but that's what I imagine the Alamo would look like or be like, very desert-esque. It was very unique. And you remember that turquoise color, that purple, that pink peach, whatever you want to call it. And just the bright colors. And then of course it had the building itself was amazing. Just everything about it was designed and marketed toward a very unique experience in that particular restaurant. And again, Pizza Hut. I've watched a documentary about Pizza Hut recently and found out the only reason they called it Pizza Hut was the free sign they were getting from the Coca-Cola company at the time would allow them to put a specific amount of characters on there, and they wanted pizza in the name, and they had 3 other characters. Well, guess what? Pizza Hut was the winner. So, the interior of those restaurants were decorated and designed a specific way because when they opened the first Pizza Hut, that's what was there. So they took that and kind of ran with the theme because that's what they became known for. Take it a step further into casual dining experiences. I can remember a little restaurant called TGI Fridays. And this place was dope. It was awesome. Everything about it, from the time you walked in to the time you left, was a magical experience for the diner. From start to finish. And they actually made a couple of movies about this. There's several movies actually about it, and that reference this aspect of it. And I'm sure you can think of a few. Now, of course, I'm drawing a blank. But, they had the suspenders, and they had the buttons, and, they had the the attitude was just they wanted to earn your business. Every time you came in, they gave you a wonderful experience because every time you came in to dine, you had to earn that business. People did not eat out the way they do today. So if you had a bad experience at a TGI Fridays, there was no, we'll get to try it again next time, because there was a grand possibility that family would never return to your establishment. So that first impression was the most important impression. And that was always important when you would go out and dine. Even when you go to places like Quincy's was another one we used to go to, and Shoney's. Everyone was so friendly, and it was, again, we didn't have to eat out. We could eat at home. Most families, as a matter of fact, ate at home most nights of the week. So eating out was a real pleasure. It was a real treat. And so those restaurateurs knew that. And even your large chain restaurants had figured it out. There was a lot of science behind the restaurant industry at the time, and they knew how to make that work. Then slowly, over time, the dynamic shifted. People eat out more today than they've ever eaten out before, whether it's fast food, casual dining, high end. It doesn't really matter. More people are eating out than ever before. And even when the pandemic struck and a lot of restaurants were closed, a lot of them never came back. But the ones that didn't come back were replaced by either a chain or a local restaurant. So a lot of our restaurants here that closed, they've been open with something else. So people are still eating out, and it's not as important to earn the business every time. They know that as long as you don't give them food poisoning and you don't die, you'll probably come back. They know that your standard of excellence when it comes to restaurants is very low. You don't look for that bright smiling face. When you go into a McDonald's, it's a vastly different experience than what we had as children growing up. It's can I take your order? What can I get for you? But they're not excited to be there. It's no longer the experience and the exciting, adventure that it once was when we were kids. And it's sad to me that something as simple as going to a restaurant to get a hamburger is now a chore. They know you're going to come eat their food. You may not want to wait in line, and you won't go to that particular one, but somebody will. It's not the business that we grew up with. So the point to all this is, when I look at my business and what I do, and of course I support businesses, so I see a lot of interesting things that the average consumer does not, because I see it from the back end. I look at things like, what are we doing to differentiate our experience dealing with these companies and what they're dealing with other companies? What makes this particular person call me when they need something and ask my opinion? We're looking at doing X, Y, and Z. Is that something you can help us with? Well, we don't do that, but let me point you in the right direction. I have a lot of managers and business owners that call me for my opinion on certain things. So why is that? And I think it's because I've built the relationship with a lot of my decision makers over the years by doing simple things like asking questions, being excited to help them, stepping out when other people won't. And if I'm being honest with you, a lot of my competitors in the industries that I serve don't really, it's not that they don't care, but they're not excited to help. It's they're there to do it, and there's not a lot of people to compete against. So, you're probably just going to go with what they've got. And they look at the pricing aspect and what's the value behind it. And that's what I think we all have to look at in our lives, not just in business, but in our lives. Are we taking these small things for granted? And I know I'm kind of rambling now, but the point I'm trying to make is, we are so busy in our lives doing so many things that the restaurant experience is just a small snippet of what we've lost, and everything else that we've got going on. What's amazing to me with these businesses and building the relationships that I've built is you have people that are trying to do, a whole lot more with a lot less. And there's a myriad of reasons we've gotten to that point. But I think it's sad we've lost the enjoyment of doing something as simple as dining out. It's not as exciting as it once was. It's not the treat that it used to be. It's now, well, we got to eat, and they know we have to eat. So the experience is, it's completely different from what, I grew up with. And in a lot of ways, that's kind of sad. My kids never got to experience the excitement of going to a restaurant and having that, having the business earned every time. It's, we're going to serve you, have a good day, and on you go. So welcome back to the next segment.
I mentioned last week that I was at home by myself and my wife and kids had just left, and don't worry, they'll be back. They're not leaving for good. They're just going on a little vacation to see her family and so forth. And so we had a an interesting week. Kind of, she was sharing with me the things that they were doing up in Pennsylvania, and uh, you know, time marches on down here. But I learned some interesting things this week. First of all, Christopher, the least outdoorsy child I have, and one of the least outdoorsy children that I know, period, has discovered his affinity for outdoor fishing. Apparently, he enjoys fishing so much so that he's now lobbying for a uh, rod and reel and some other things for his birthday. And I thought that was pretty neat that, he's been fishing before with my buddy Matt. And, we go stand on the bank and, launch a line and everybody's happy. But he actually caught fish this time. He's been in a boat. He thought that was pretty neat. And so he discovered that. And then he also discovered the wonderful world of uh, four wheelers, ATVs, whatever. And he went from riding on a four wheeler to driving a four wheeler. So now I'm sure he's going to want to, look at making friends with people who have four wheelers or daddy buying a four wheeler. We'll see. David, my business partner, actually has a boat and a four wheeler, funny enough. So we'll have to see. But Christopher's really adamant about the fishing thing. So that's pretty neat. So he learned that about himself, and that's cool. I like to fish too. I don't like to catch anything. Um, I like sitting by the bank in the middle of nowhere with the hook in the water. That's my deal. And catching fish is fine, I guess, but um, killing time's even more fun. So, um, the other thing I've learned is my ability to come up with creative meals doesn't matter. When I get home and it's dinner time, like I'm hungry. So I travel the path of least resistance. Now I still get in some good things. I still eat, balanced meals, but for the most part, I just don't have a flair for creativity when it comes to dinner. So two things I have lived off of for the last week have been turkey dogs. That's hot dogs made of ground turkey and so forth, and sloppy Joe made with ground turkey. And these have been my go-tos this week. These have been the ones that have been the most exciting. Every night I'm like, which one do I want? And it's, one or the other. It doesn't really matter. But you do have to kind of plan ahead when you freeze things like my wife did. We did have chicken one night. I say we, Mr. Buddy and I. We had chicken one night when I brought home some spinach casserole and collard greens from one of my favorite restaurants here in town. Gale's down the street, located off of Zelda Road in Montgomery, Alabama. If you've never been, you must go sit at the bar and have lunch with Russell Terry. Yes, he has two first names, but great guy, and it is. I think it's $2 cheaper to eat at the bar versus sitting at a table. So anyway, but I love, love, love spinach casserole and their squash casserole. So I enjoyed that one night with some of their some chicken that my wife had made last week and froze for me. So the eating situation has been not bad. My breakfast I have switched up a little bit. It used to be two pieces of turkey bacon and two pieces of toast with a little jelly on them and a cup of coffee. And this week I kind of switched it up a little bit, just trying something different, I guess. But coffee is definitely the mainstay. Um, so as long as I have coffee and something to take my meds with, I'm good. And that was another thing that was a bit of a challenge this week was remembering to take my medication in the morning. That's the big dose for everything. So I only left once without taking it, and I attempted to walk out of the door two different times without taking it. Then realized when I got in the truck I need to go take my meds. So, and if I don't take my medication, it's not a good thing for anybody. So, but luckily I was formulated a way to remember all that. So also this week, I was approached about traveling to the big city of Des Moines, Iowa. We actually have several companies that we do business with in Des Moines, and we've got about, I don't know, 40 radios, I think, something I can't remember. But anyway, it's a decent number of radios. It accounts for a decent chunk of revenue. And so I just want to go out there and kind of, shake hands and kiss babies and see what we got going on out there and learn more about the Iowa market. I don't know a lot about Des Moines other than what my, you know, customers have told me and the experiences that they've shared with me. So I'm pretty interested in kind of learning a little bit about that market. And of course, I'd like to do that before it gets cold because I don't really do snow. So anyway, um, the bottom line is that's on the book. And I also looked at flying versus driving. And the flying thing kind of gets on my nerves a little bit. Let's say you got a 10 a.m. flight out of Atlanta, which is 9 a.m. my time. I got to be there 2 hours ahead of time. So that means I got to be there by, you know, 7 o'clock my time. In order to be there by 7 o'clock my time, I got to leave at 4 o'clock. It just goes on and on and on. So it's kind of like, all right, it makes for a very long day. And, by the time you land, it's, sometime in the afternoon or evening, and you had who knows how many layovers. And luckily I don't smoke anymore. That used to be my big reason why I didn't fly, because I couldn't go 12 hours without a cigarette. Now it's just a handle, and when you get there, you gotta hope the rental cars have, they got what you need. And it can be a headache. So I like piloting and being the captain of my own ship, so I'm probably gonna drive. And I've looked at some really interesting places between here in Des Moines also. Nashville's definitely a pit stop on the list, which I can't wait. They've got some places at Nashville I want to visit. And then there's some other areas. I think St. Louis is on the list. And, just depending on which way you go and come back, it really makes all the difference in the world. So, but there's some pretty cool things along the way that I plan on, trying out. So I was going to do it in the coming weeks, like in the next week or two. But I think with what we're trying to accomplish, I need a little more time to prepare. It'll be well worth it. So I do have a big trip coming up. We're gonna try to finalize some dates and times and get on the road, and maybe I'll be able to meet some new people and introduce more people to what we're doing here. So, but yeah, this week hadn't been all bad. It's been pretty quick, believe it or not. Um, I figured it would drag on, because you come home and you're bored, but I really haven't been bored when I get home. I mean, I've just been tired. So it's been a good week, all in all. All right, we're going to enjoy the beautiful outdoors in central Alabama now. I'm sitting in my backyard, the sunshine, got a little breeze flowing, and of course it's Saturday, so everybody's on the move. It's man, it's nice to be outside today. I've got some yard work to knock out, and I'll probably do that in just a bit. But anyway, so last week I made a big announcement, and I told you that I was all about the whole, writing a book thing, and it's something I've been contemplating for a while. And I've been doing a lot of research to figure out, what that looks like. And basically, what I'm learning is, once you have the concept and what it is you're after, then of course you write the book. And once you have a completed book, there's quite a few avenues to go through to get published. And it's easier today to get published than ever before because we live in a digital world. So unlike years past when you had to send it to a publisher and they had to make an agreement and print 100,000 copies, and if your book didn't sell, they sent them back to you in boxes with shredded copies of your book so they wouldn't get damaged. It's not that way anymore. So um, I had somebody ask me the other day that heard the podcast, say, "Hey, you're writing a book. What's your book going to be about?" And I kind of explained to him it's going to be about my first year in recovery from a heart attack. And kind of looked at me sideways. I was like, "Yeah, I know what you're thinking." But here's what I learned when I was 40 years old, looking at the prospect of what my future looked like. Nobody had the answers. And it wasn't, we'll just have to see how it goes. That was part of it. But most of the people that I knew that had survived heart attacks, were much older than I was. And the youngest one that I knew that I could think of was a guy I used to work with, and he's like 63 now, and he had a heart attack in his mid 50s. So those experiences are going to be vastly different. And when I went and, looked online to see what I could expect or find people that were my age group, under the age of 50 even, to see what that looked like, I had a hard time finding those people. And there was one guy who worked in the video production space, and he had a heart attack, and through diet and exercise and yada yada yada, he lives a very different life now, and he survived, and I think he's 47 now, but he was 42 or 43, and he had a heart attack. And that was the closest one I could find, and the guy looks amazing. I mean, he's looks healthy. He's, of course, some of the things that he did, I have a hard time with, like the vegan diet stuff and things of that nature. But it kind of gave me some hope, but that was the closest one that I found. I also learned that there are a lot of women who have heart attacks, and that female heart attacks are something that they've written books about, and there's studies, and there's this and there's that. But there's really nobody talking about, you know, heart attacks around the age of 40. And it's just not a common conversation. I can see why that would be. But what I wanted to do was share my story and what I've experienced. And while I'm younger than most people who have experienced a heart attack, um, I want to let people know that are out there doing, whatever it is they want to do, and they're faced with the decisions that I was faced with. There's life after coming home from the hospital. And I think it's important that we talk about both sides of that. And something I see a lot is people who have been through a life altering experience, but it doesn't change them. And what I mean by that is I have a really good friend of mine who was just shocked when I had a heart attack. And I talked to this guy, you know, periodically. I don't talk to him near as much as I used to, but we were really good friends at one point. And, he's like, man, I can't believe it happened to you. And, I know you're active, and I know you got things against you like smoking and, your weight and all that, but damn, I can't believe it happened to you. And I had that conversation with a lot of people, by the way. Um, it shouldn't have happened. And well, it did. And I don't really know why, but I will tell you that it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me, believe it or not. So the point I'm circling back around to was, he was on a path of making very definitive changes in his life. And he and I are on similar paths, were on similar paths. And it motivated him to, become more active. He's a lot more um, involved in doing outdoor activities and moving around and adjusting the diet. And he was doing amazing. I couldn't believe, I mean, he was, again, very much like I am when it came to lifestyle and things of that nature. He even quit smoking, which I was really proud of him. I couldn't believe that. And I ran into him recently, and, he looked different. He'd lost some weight, and we got to talking, and, we're standing there just kind of BSing, and I took notice that there was a, pack of smokes in his pocket. And I was like, you smoking again? He's like, yeah, just here and there. I'm like, wow. I was like, so you quit for how long? And he said, about 6 months. I said, I got you. I'm not judging you, I'm just asking, He's like, I understand. And I was asking about some of the other things, and the gym had worn off. He hadn't been to the gym in a couple of months. And I finally asked him, I said, what changed? He goes, what do you mean? I said, you were so damn motivated. I mean, hell, you were motivating me at one point, to get back to where I was. And now all the things that you were working toward are done. And you know what he said to me? Oh, I went to my doctor, and my doctor said that with the prescriptions and everything that I'm doing, that I'm taking, I should be fine. I don't have to worry about this extra stuff. Okay. I said, well, hey, that's cool, man. If that works for you, that's awesome. It's amazing how people will look for the easy way out. And I told this guy, I'm like, you can still, do what you want to do. You don't have to be dependent on a pill for the rest of your life. And this guy's been on, he's mid 40s. He's been on various medications since I mean, at least 10, 12 years that I know of. And, he's type 2 diabetic. He's got all these other fun things that go along with, heart health. He also has um, something with the thyroid gland from time to time, just random stuff. And, you would think that, I've reversed diabetes. When I went to get my eye examination done back in March, my eyesight had actually improved to the point the glasses I was wearing were completely useless. Um, I just got those replacement lenses in this week. Yeah, that was 2 months ago. Well, a little more than 2 months ago. But I finally ordered my glasses and I got them in, and my eyes, I actually had to relax. It took me 2 days to get to where I could see and like function with my glasses. I couldn't do anything as far as reading the small text and things like that for a couple of days, and that was okay. But the point I'm making is like this was a vast improvement, and I'm pretty sure that when I go back for another eye exam, which my 6 month is coming up, I think in like August, September, I can't remember, but I'm pretty sure I will have done even better by then. So I'm actually improving, and I do have damage that I'll never be able to get back. But look at the fact that, I'm no longer considered a type 2 diabetic. My vision's getting better. I had a Subway sandwich, chips, and water with a handful of M&Ms for lunch last week, and I was like, gosh, I know I just blew the budget on this deal. My blood sugar is going to be through the roof. I can't believe I did that. And I don't eat that way every day, please remember. And 90-minute mark, I took my blood sugar, and I was at 133. I couldn't believe it. It's like, wow. So you can improve your situation regardless, and I think the book needs to talk about that. And while my results won't be the same for everybody else, I get that. But they may be better, they may be worse, or they may be about the same. I don't know. But the point is, you have to try every single day. That day that I blew the budget on my lunch, so to speak, even though my blood sugar came out like it was supposed to, and that was all well and good, I still did an extra mile that night. You know, I jogged an extra mile just because, again, it wasn't punishment. It was, if you're going to eat like this, then you have to, burn off the extra calories. You have to do the extra work. So it's things like that that have allowed me to, lose weight. I'm getting my muscle mass back, which, by the way, when you lose muscle and getting it back is the hardest thing ever. And you don't want to get in a situation where you lose it. It's crazy, but it'll motivate you to do some things that you wouldn't think you would do either. These are all things I need to talk about in the book. These are all things that make sense to people who have survived. And it's not about changing your diet and exercise, and that's not it at all. It's about lifestyle. I have a new phrase that I've been employing lately, and it's making some people unhappy. And I'm sorry that it's that way, but I'm not going to do that, or I'm not doing that. Pick your variation, and it's not me being selfish. It's me saying, look, I used to help everybody do everything, and now I can't do that. I have to pick and choose, and I have to do what's best for me. And while I can still help people, I'm not willing to help people that aren't going to help themselves. I will only help people who are willing to help themselves, who are willing to move forward in life and do what needs to be done. And I understand that we all fall on hard times and things happen. But what we're not going to do is prop people up forevermore, because we're more of a hindrance at that point, and we're being more of a burden than we're actually helping them. And that's something I've experienced in my own life. I've had people do that to me and help me out, and they just keep on and on and on, and finally, they've had to say, look, we're not helping you anymore, and I had to figure it out. I've been very fortunate in my life. I really have. And now that I have the second chance, I've got to use the time that I have left to, do what I can to help others. And that's a lot of what this book is going to talk about. So I've got to get through my first year of survival. And once I complete my first year, I'll complete my book, and probably going to try to put it together and make it available in January 2023. That's the next year, right? Yeah, so survival's in September. Yeah, that should give me enough time. So January 23 is the goal for the book. So I've already started working on the outline and filling in some of the gaps. And when my wife gets home, I want to sit down and talk to her and kind of get her input on this as well. But I want it to be something that everybody can read and take something away from. And whether you survived a heart attack or not, it's about changing your life for the better and being the best you can be. So look forward to that January 2023.
Well, friend, unfortunately, we're out of time again. But the good news is I'll be back next week with some more content, some more stories to share, and some more things to share with you. I hope you have a great week coming up, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Don't forget to visit www.podpage.com/Chris Black to learn more about the podcast, and you can even interact with me live on my social media from there. So until next week, take care.